What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Salty Dogs podcast. I'm your solo host today, Jason. We've got Casey out and Chris out. It's been kind of a crazy season. We've been back and forth with different hosts out, but today it's just me, but it's not just me because, of course, I have somebody here at the table. And so we're just going to dive in today. I'm going to welcome Matt Thomas to the podcast. What's up, man?
How you doing, Jason?
I'm good, bro. So good to have you. So, you know, what's unique about today is that our last episode, we actually did a live stream kind of conference deal with a couple guys in Kansas City.
Okay.
And so one guy's name is Kyle Walker. He does a show called Walking with God. And then there's another guy named Joe Clausen.
Okay.
And he's in ministry there. And so we did the whole Wichita KC Connect this last time. And so we're doing it again.
That's a win.
Yeah, man. So we're 2 times in a row getting some KC guys here on the podcast. And so good to have you. We got a couple things in the works tonight. You got a book.
Yes,
you work for a ministry, and so I'm just going to let you tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe just start with talking about the ministry and where you're at and what you're doing, what you guys are up to, and then I want to hit on the book because you tell some of your life story.
Yeah. And
so I know that's a very interesting story. And so,
yes,
of course, we want to hear all about it, man. So,
cool.
Again, welcome and have at it.
Cool.
It's your floor.
Sweet. Thanks, Jason.
All right.
So what I do is I work with 3 organizations. I work with Brothers in Blue Reentry, Firm Foundations, and World Impact.
Okay. So Firm Foundations is a part of World Impact?
No, it's separate. They're all separate. Okay. And it's funny, right? So we started Firm Foundations with some people from church back in 2013, and we started mentoring in the prison, got a house, got another house, and got another house. And then through the process, I got offered a job up at Lansing Prison and to help be the program manager of Brothers in Blue. Well, through this process with World Impact's empowerment, I was able to become a pastor and help plant some churches. And so really we ended up planting a couple churches in 2 different prisons with some great guys like my friend Troy. And so out of that came really what I do now. And so what I do is I help men successfully reenter society, starting from when they're sitting in prison rather than waiting till they get the street.
So you're working inside the prison?
Yes, sir.
And so is that like a daily basis, or?
So about 2 days a week, I'm inside of the prison. 2 days a week, I'm in the minimum camp in one day, and then I'm in the max camp on the next day. And it used to be 50 to 60 hours a week I was in the prison, and it's a chance of a lifetime to really walk with these men and to help them see that this isn't the end game.
Right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, so a lot of people talk about coming to the Lord in prison. A lot of people are skeptical about it.
Oh, the old jailhouse religion?
The old jailhouse religion. So tell me about it, man. Talk about just some of the faith of the guys there, and then even how that continues when they get out.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? The reason it's called jailhouse religion is when God gets a hold of you, right? We don't ever just wake up and decide to serve God. It just doesn't work like that. But when he gets a hold of you, he gets a hold of you in the space that you need to be gotten a hold of. And a lot of the times it's persecution, prison, poverty, and and those type of things. And so these men and these women have a honest experience with God. And,
right.
And what ends up happening is they get a healthy dose of the Holy Spirit. They get excited. They start reading their Bible. They start doing these things. And it's not that they forget about it. And this is just, this is like a kick to the chin, right? We
Sure.
as Christians do a real bad job of discipling them
right.
to help them get out of prison and be successful. So even in my life, right, I had 30-something years of garbage, and you couldn't snap your fingers and expect me to just walk with Christ. Somebody had to walk with me. And so what happens is they release out of prison, and they leave it at the prison door because they don't know how to live on the street according to those standards. They've never learned how to hold down a regular job, how to go to church, how to, any of those things that a lot of us take for granted. It's foreign to them.
Right. It's interesting. You reminded me of, or I just had a thought come to mind. So obviously there's connection with World Impact and all that. Dr. Don Davis, phenomenal guy.
Yes.
I can't wait to have him on the podcast. He's still on the list. I hope we can get him. But anyways, I heard him, I believe it was him where he was talking about that maybe it's the Malaysians, but people in the South Asia area that they have maybe it's Poland. Well, I can't remember. Anyways, Indonesia or Malaysia. They have such a strong sense of community, even in just their secular culture,
right.
And it's primarily Muslim, and it's illegal to convert. And so when they do convert, they're completely rejected by their current community. That the first question that they ask when they come to Christ is they say, "Who do I belong to now? Like, where do I go?
Right.
Who's my community? Who's my family? I don't know how to exist," because they're so used to, in their secular culture, depending on everybody. I just read a quote today. It says, "I am because we are." Have you heard this quote?
No, but that's true. I mean, that's the absolute truth. And we expect them to be able to just shift everything in their life. And so I have a great mentor named Jeff. And Jeff told me, he goes, after I read your book, he said, I understood prison a little bit better. He says, it's like we go put somebody in the corner for 10 years and then don't tell them anything. Don't explain what they did wrong. Don't show them how to do anything different. And then let them out of the corner, slap their hand and say, go. You know what I mean? Don't come back. And you have to expect them to come back after something like that.
Right. That kind of reminds me of something else, this idea of justice, but redemptive justice, right? Not just justice. A lot of times we think justice is, well, you're getting what you deserve because you did something bad. But I think that God's idea of justice is redemptive justice. Right. There might be consequences, but I'm going to redeem you and restore you.
Yep.
And so it's not just you did bad, you deserve punishment for it, but that thing inside of you, your heart, your mind, your life, whatever happened that caused you to do harm to someone else or do something illegal or whatever it is that requires justice, well, he's gonna go for that. He's gonna fix that place where that thing was born from. And so it's what do they talk about? It's what's the word? When a guy, oh gosh, I can't think of it.
What's the scenario?
When a guy goes into prison and essentially he comes out fixed. Like, have you been
rehabilitated?
Rehabilitated. Yeah, I just, that whole situation. Are they going in and receiving that, or are they going in and not receiving and coming out and then just same guy?
So here's the problem, right? And you said it. You said it dead on. The punitive damages is the time spent in prison, right? So I sentence you to 5 to 10 years. I sentence you to 3 years. I sentence you to 2 years. Whatever the sentence is, that's the punitive justice part, right?
Yeah.
So the issue is we don't do anything with that, and the majority of the time you just go do prison time, and then so that whole time you're spent sitting there, okay, I hit the weight pit. You know what I mean? Maybe I got my GED, but. And that's good, but why aren't we educating? Why aren't we developing? Why aren't we building? Why aren't we having companies like Pete Oaks does a real good job. He's got companies inside of Hutch and Randy Reinhardt up in Lansing. He's got private industries in the prison, right, where these men can go. They earn a living wage.
Right.
They pay their bills. They pay child support, and through the process, they've gained a skill that they can use on the street to be successful when they get out. But that's not the normal. The normal is you go to prison, you make 10 cents an hour, you work running a mop, you know what I mean? You do these things, and it's like, if we were really interested in bettering the society and the community and developing men and women to be successful, then we would invest in them. And most of the time we just don't.
Yeah, and you're talking about inside the prison, right? And not just when people come out.
No, I'm talking about it should start. So really, I teach a class. I teach a couple classes in there, but one of them is reentry mindset, and it's the thought that as soon as you go to prison, you need to start preparing for your release, because you're the only one that does your time, and guess what? You're the only one that's doing your reentry. So if you can catch like-minded people to walk that process out with you, okay, what are your goals? What do you want to do? Where are you trying? You know what I mean? And from the time you get there, you're prepared for release. If you wait till you step out of prison, you are playing catch up that you possibly can't catch up to.
Right. So you're part of a ministry that goes in and starts that process.
Yes, sir.
It's called Firm Foundations.
Yep. So
you're the director? Is that right? So
I'm the director of Firm Foundations, and the Firm Foundations piece is really just the housing. That's So this is how we started, right? This was the beautiful thing. We started Firm Foundations. We got these houses, and then we noticed there was guys coming out that were way ahead of everybody else. I'm talking, they had relapse prevention plans, they had safety plans, they had plans for goals, they had all these things happening where they could track with them, and they were ready for leadership. I mean, they were just, and they were coming through this program called Brothers in Blue Reentry, and so that's kind of what I do. So I really,
so like blue jumpsuit.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Kind of. It's so they wear blue T-shirts and blue jeans and boots, and so that's where the Brothers in Blue come from.
All right, yeah, and so let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Then. And let's talk about the book, because I know the book kind of talks about your past, and then how the Lord intervened in your life and completely changed things around, and obviously everything that happened has led you, the sovereignty of God, right, has led you to where you're at with what you're doing. And so let's get to the heart behind it, man. I want to hear about you and just, what's in the book. To tell us what you want us to know about you, because I know it'll lead to what you want us to know about the Lord.
So man, that's a loaded question.
I know. Yeah. Welcome.
Yeah. I'm going to take a drink before I get into that.
That's totally fine.
No, here's the deal. So I was raised in a household that, my mom was an alcoholic, and my dad wasn't there, and he was a drug addict, and he was real abusive and mean, and so the whole reason that my mom left him was because he was vicious. I mean, she would tell me stories of just he threatened to like throw her off the motorcycle on the freeway. I mean, just crazy stuff. And so when she found out that he'd been cheating multiple times, and then, there's a couple times it got close to really hurting her, she split. And so what happened?
And where'd you grow up?
So I bounced around all over, and that's part of the deal. So I was born in Oregon.
Okay.
I lived there for a few years, and we moved to Nevada. And then when we moved to Nevada, I'd been abused, and some other things happened, and so I started acting out and getting into trouble, and so I picked up my first 2 charges when I was in 3rd grade, 2 counts of grand larceny, and then after those,
what is larceny?
Stealing. So
okay.
I stole a pair of gloves, I left, and then I went back with a kid, and he stole something, and then I had another thing that I was stealing, but when he got caught, they got me on video surveillance for both of those, and so I got 2 counts of stealing. And so it was Christmas Eve. I went to juvenile hall. My mom was super mad, but I didn't know how to deal and process the stuff that had happened to me. And so then after that, I broke into the school, and we set the library on fire and rolled fire extinguisher. Oh, it was all bad.
Wow.
But that's kind of that acting out, because I really didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so it shaped me to where when I saw drugs, I jumped right in. It wasn't even, and I always, the first time I ever did a line of meth, that was it. I was hooked. There was no process into it. It was immediate.
Right.
And so.
And this was what age?
I was like 13 when that happened. And
13 and meth.
Yeah. And so my dad, right? So my dad comes out of prison. This is all through the process. I wanted to be just like my dad. I thought he was the coolest guy in the world. He was a biker. He had this. And so I idolized that. And so what ended up happening was, he had shot me up with heroin one time, and so it was real crazy, because, the sovereignty of God. He saved me from ever really messing with needles or heroin. As I got older, there was something subconscious that just really
right.
And so as bad as it was, it kind of helped. And so then I ended up, I dropped out of high school right when my sophomore year started. I get put into a boys ranch, Agape boarding school up in Washington, and it's extremely fundamental and an independent Baptist and King James Bible, and women wear dresses, and there was like no music, and it was, and I didn't grow up around anything that was church, and so it was a culture shock. I had a mohawk and a Slayer shirt, that's it was like 2 contrary things, but it was really neat because I learned about the Word of God, and even if it was skewed, from the point of fear, and I had a foundation laid that of course didn't take root right away, but later on. And so then I left that, and then I ended up meeting a girl. She got pregnant. I joined the Navy. we had a baby. We had another one. Left the Navy, got an honorable discharge. I was on a submarine, and then what had happened was while I was in the Navy, one of our neighbors was doing drugs, and so my ex-wife was like, "Hey, Dee Dee's got some dope if you know what I mean, if you want to get high," and so I did.
And this is what age now?
I was 20. I think I was 20, and I was in the Navy, and so I started getting high, and then it turned out like my whole division on the submarine for sonar techs were getting high, and so it was. I mean, it was crazy. It was like it was the devil was always there, you know. I mean, and he just kind of walked that life with me, and so every time God would really start to move, man, I jump right over the fence to the other side. And so we ended up, you know, getting a divorce, and I ended up going way off the deep end. You know, my dad ended up getting killed, and so my dad was shooting drugs, and it's on the internet, so you can look up the toll of meth and look up Mitchell Thomas, and in Lake Elsinore, he went in the bathroom. He was shooting dope with a woman, and her boyfriend woke up and beat my dad into a coma, and he died a week later. And so I found this all out, and I just lost it. I started robbing people, and it didn't matter if it was daylight or, you know, at nighttime I was stealing. I mean, I was just ruthless. I just completely lost it. And so through the process, you know, the police were always looking for me, and I'd be in and out of county jail, and I got caught in a stolen car. And so they had all these things against me, and then a confidential informant turned me in, which I deserved it. You know what I mean? I was dirty. I can't be mad. That was pretty much my doing. But they pulled me into court and held me on a no bond charge that wasn't even real, so they could pull all the charges up.
Dang.
So when all was said and done, it was burglary tools, theft of means of transportation, possession of paraphernalia, and another possession of possession of drugs. So they were trying to give me like 6.5, 7 years, and the weirdest thing happened, right? And I was mouthy, and so I had actually left court, and she gave me probation for the stolen car, and I broke into a car over at Quick Trip, like right across the street from the courthouse. I mean, I literally just left. And she was mad. She was super mad, but she was absolutely livid. But she goes, "I'm going to run your time concurrent." She says, "If I ever see you again, I'm giving you the maximum." She says, I will pull your priors, and I will give you the max. So so you take your 3 years, you go do your 3, you know what I mean? And so I ended up doing 2.5 on the 3. I get to prison, and God moved. I don't even know how to explain it. And so I did my time in Arizona. Arizona is a super racist, super strict. The whole prison system's just like that. They call it political, and it's if you're white, you run with the whites. If you're African American, you run with them. You don't share food together. You don't, you know, and you could smoke and chew out there. You don't share. I mean, you just don't. You get beat up for doing that stuff. And so what ends up happening is we plant a church, and I don't even know how. Right? I knew when I got there, I had to do something. I had to change, and I knew that God was really working a lot of that. And so I put my face in the Bible, and I started working, and then we started going to church. And then what happened was it was like the chaplain really kind of wasn't really plugged in. And so we were like, man, we got to do something. And so, man, we built a church from like 5 to 10 people to 70 people. We had praise night, we had prayer night, you know what I mean? It was, and it was powerful. And so the yard held like 440 people. And so almost 20% of the yard was coming to church 2 or 3 times a week, and God just exploded.
And so who's leading this?
It was us. It was just us guys. Like there was me. There was a guy named Kevin who called him Kickstand. There was Joseph Skinner. There was his kid. We call him his kid, but it was Jeremy. It was. I mean, there was just a lot of us, just guys that.
And so you guys are just there, and you're just like, man, the Lord is good. Like,
and we just dug in. Yeah. And it was crazy. And we saw families restored. We saw answer to prayer. Right. We saw a lot of the racist stuff break down where we could sit and break bread. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I was getting ready to get out, and I was thinking, man, I don't even know how to have fun. I don't know how to live without drugs. I just
can't
don't
imagine the life.
Because here's the example of what we opened up with. In Arizona, you go to prison, you work, and then you get out of prison. You know what I mean? And now they're starting to do some kind of program, but it's not a lot. And I'm talking, I was in 10 years ago, and there's still, and so as I came out, I was still the same person. I just had Jesus. And
Right.
I really didn't know. I had a great work ethic. You know, I knew I had a love for God, but I still had all that baggage and the damage and all that stuff that had just been just broken for years. And so I get out, I do real good, but then I meet a girl, and so of course, right? She's not a Christian. She's an alcoholic. And so of course we start sleeping together, and you know what I mean. And as it goes, I mean, you know how the story goes.
Right.
And so
Yep.
I ended up relapsing. I ended up,
Oh,
walking out
man.
of church, and
Yeah.
so I never did meth again. But
Yeah.
I had a tooth pulled, and I ate three Percocet for, you know what I mean. I didn't
Yeah.
even need them. But it's that
Yep.
that same mentality.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
so then. I mean, it's just, and then later that year, my kids' mom got killed out in Lyons, Kansas. Somebody kicked in one of her boyfriend, it was like her ex-boyfriend, kicked in the front door, killed my kids' mom. And I mean, it was just,
Gosh,
it was just
man.
crazy. And
I just can't even imagine, bro. Like all that tragedy, all that violence.
no, it's weird because you don't notice, you know what I mean? Like I talk to people and they're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible,
Yeah.
right? But you almost come, like working in the prison, we joke about this, right? But you become so just callous to it that you know that I work in a max prison, man. I clown around with these guys, I punch them, they punch me, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, and I mean these are straight up killers, but
Right.
they're killers that have been saved, you know what I mean, by
Yeah,
God,
yeah.
and so it's well, and obviously there's something wrong with my normal meter because it's pretty broken, but
Yeah, right. What is normal?
yeah, hey,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's the deal. And so you know what ended up happening was my mom had custody of my girls. I had two older daughters. My mom had custody. I got off paper out of Arizona. I got off parole. A year later, I moved out to Wichita. I moved in my mom's basement and started, you know, got a job and got another job because, like I told you, I'm a hard worker. So I work, and so I'm still not following God, watching the wrong movies, dipping in, you know what I mean? Just doing.
Yeah.
Now I'm not getting high. I'm not drinking. I'm not, but I'm definitely not living for the Lord. I ain't
Right.
in church.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is I had this girl that was my fiance when I went to prison, and she left a couple of weeks after I went, and I really don't blame her because I was an extreme narcissist, and it was just all bad. I was dealing drugs and robbing. I mean, I put her in the middle of this whole mess, and so I got out and I couldn't find her, and you know, and I'll get to the cool part, but
Sure.
besides the fact that she's cool, but so what ended up happening was she comes out and we're still not living right, so we mess around and she ends up pregnant.
Yeah.
And so we continue going like nothing's happening, and then we almost lose the baby. And it was my God moment, and I don't even know how else to explain it. We sat down at St. Joe's, and then I asked the nurse, I said, hey, you know, is the baby okay? Is the baby gonna, and because she was bleeding, and I mean it was
Right.
bad.
Yeah.
And she goes, man, I can't promise you. I really can't. And so this was August or September, maybe August of 2011. She had just barely come out in June, and I mean, she ended up pregnant like really fast.
Right,
And so
right.
it was one of those deals where I didn't know what to do, right? And really I had come face to face with my sin, and not only my sin, but just my complete rejection of who God was. And I thought of David and Bathsheba, and I thought
Yeah.
about, you know, all the times that I made God a vow, or I promised this, or God, just get me out of this. You know what I mean? Or God, I just need, and really I had that moment, and I said, look, God, you know, and it was this weird, snotty, nasty cry where it was like I don't know what else to do, but I need you.
It makes the pastor look over and go, that brother's truly repenting.
I wasn't even in the church, right? I'm in the parking lot
okay,
in the
all
cab
right.
of a truck, just bawling, right?
Just ball. Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is I say, you know what, God, if you let this baby live, we won't have, you know what I mean? We
Yeah.
won't do it again until we're married. And
Right.
but if not, you know, that's I understand. And really, you know, the question was never if God was going to take the baby. The question was, hey man, are you done? You know what I mean? And that was it was now looking back, I can see that God was he was tired of me just completely disregarding and disrespecting who he is and the call that he had on my life. And so, man, right after that, guys like Heath Duncan, it's crazy. We were all in a small group together. So it was me, my wife, Heath Duncan, Samantha, Brian Lucci, his wife, oh man, I just spaced his name. Brian from When Pigs Fly and his wife. I mean, we were all right, and we were all like the knuckleheads of Pathway Church when it was just barely turned Pathway Church, and God used Todd Carter to really develop us in
wow.
And so what ended up happening is we ended up getting married October 27th, and we honored the the vow that we made.
Yeah, absolutely.
My son Hunter was born the following year, and it was really just God really making me toe the line. And so I dug into Francis Chan videos and listened to Mark Driscoll because I always liked the way Mark Driscoll taught, because he's a little rough, and so I appreciated it. Yeah. And so I worked third shift, and I would listen to podcasts and sermons, and just all night long I just dug,
just inundated.
I
with
did.
It, yeah.
I absolutely dug in, man. I was in church every time it was open. We got rebaptized right before we started Firm Foundations because Jesus did that, right? It just made sense. It was like, well, Jesus got baptized, and so we might as well do it.
Sure.
And then I started mentoring, and then we got 1 house, 2 houses, 3, and so
talk about that if you can. Tell me a little bit about the houses. Like, what are those like?
So we have a setup where men come to a house. We have a house leader, and then we have an assistant house leader. And guys will come in, and so we run the program. No drinking, no drugs, absolutely no violence. No violence is even the threat of violence. That's one of those where you got to go. We can work with a lot of things, but that's not one of them. The guys are required to hit 3 meetings a week. So a church and 2 other things like NAAA, Celebrate Recovery, something along those lines. And we help plug them into places like Elite Staff, and there's some other really good staffing agencies that really are help with our guys, getting jobs, and we've got good job leads, and so we help them find a church, we help them find a job. Now here's the deal: we help them, right? We don't do it for them. We empower them to do it, and so we charge $400 a month rent that covers all your bills except your food, and
so they have to be working, doing something, bringing in some money.
Because here's the deal, right? Every man, really, or woman that comes out of prison needs to be active doing something. You need that. It's a gratification thing to where you feel worth. And now I'm not asking you to find your worth in your job, but it helps, right? And we know this, man. When you sit around doing, you feel it. And so we want them to understand that they are being restored, and redeemed better than they ever were before. Yeah.
So, you started working in the homes here in Wichita.
Yep.
And you were doing that through which ministry?
Through Firm Foundations.
Through Firm Foundations, okay. Does Firm Foundations, does that have any affiliation to Second Chance Ministries?
No, we're just really good friends.
Okay.
That's so Heath. Heath's just a really good friend of mine. I just sat with him today for like an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah. I need to meet with him.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Maybe he'll listen to this. Heath, come on, bro, let's do it. We got to sit down. Yeah, I sat down with Phil a couple weeks ago, just talking about maybe helping with some of their ministry, what they're doing.
Yep. He's a good dude.
So he's helping run one of their homes too, right?
I believe so, and I believe he's working
mentorship programs.
and I believe he's working with the Trap Coffee House, and stuff like that. So
local ministries here in Wichita. Yeah, awesome. So the book, talk about the title, Overlooked.
So Overlooked. Here's what happened. I went to the Exponential Church Planning Conference out in Orlando, and huge conference, famous people, blah blah blah, and so Albert Tate is an amazing preacher. I love listening to him speak. But him and Andy Stanley, the topic was Hero Maker, and it still gets me mad sometimes. Everybody, because everybody overlooks the prison, right? And people plant churches in third world countries and in urban environments and house churches and this, you know what I mean? They plant all these churches, and that's what I listen to. I listen to multiple organizations talk about different places to plant, which is good, but nobody talks about prison, right? And so
after we had successfully just planted, when we got there, I mean, we were on like our 5th church, and 5 of the, or 6 churches, 5 were inside of 2 prisons, and 1 was on the street that we had started, right? And these were all with men that are either in prison or coming out, and
Right.
and it just broke my heart, because we look back at Arizona, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you're missing something here.
Right.
And so I kept looking back at people that would tell me, hey, you should write a book. You should write a book. Like, your life is nuts. You know what I mean? Write the stuff down, write a book. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And then, well, that's what happened. So out in Orlando, it's like the last day, we're about to leave. I'm sitting there with my buddy Troy Stallings, and we're sitting around the pool, and the girls had already left, right? Our wives had boarded the plane. And I said, dude, I think I'm going to write a book. And he goes, hey, man, that's cool. And I said, no, I'm serious.
No, seriously,
I
I'm
really think I'm
gonna
going to write a book, right? And so the overlooked comes from, they're overlooked. And the whole prison population, when it comes to leadership and development and growth and ministry, I mean, ministry, it's overlooked. We plug a lot of guys like me into areas like, oh, well, you can do some homeless ministry, right? Or you can do some street ministry, or you can do, and it's like, it was foreign that I could possibly get up and speak at a suburban church, or, you know what I mean? And it really affected me. It really bothered me, because it's like, if God is the God that I read about in the Bible, then that's exactly what he does, right? He put these uneducated fishermen in multiple, in places that that change the world. So I could never understand how that, that changed through the process. And so I titled it The Overlooked, because I walk with these men. I watch them. I cry with them, right? I hurt with them, man. I walk with them when they get stabbed 27 times over some gangs. You know what I mean? And the deal is unless we pour into that, we just help perpetuate the cycle. And so for me, the overlooked at the core is it's not even just the prisoners, but it's women. It's, you know what I mean? It's anybody that's stuck in that spot where it's like, well, I appreciate what you're saying, but we're gonna go with somebody else over here.
And the deal is, so I went to Mending Place a couple weeks back, because I was doing some filming for their 10-year anniversary. I think I talked about this maybe on the last podcast. I can't remember, but it was really interesting, because Dion was preaching a series called 3 miles per hour. And it's essentially the speed at which Jesus walked the earth, right? And what was interesting is, he said he didn't ride chariots like the rich and the powerful. He walked among the people who couldn't afford those kinds of things in life, and who weren't among the powerful and the rich. But he slowed down 3 miles per hour so that he could go through Samaria, right? So he could touch the lepers, and he could. He walked slow enough so that the woman with the issue of blood could touch him, right?
That's
that kind of thing. And so just as you're talking about this, man, it just reminds me of, like, you talk about, like, well, why don't churches plant into the prisons? Well, because it's not glorious ministry, man.
It's ugly.
It's not pretty. It's not. So I helped plant a church. I didn't know what I was getting into when I came to plant a church. All I knew was that I was trying to chase after the Lord, right? Like, that was my decision. It was like, yeah, I'm going to come do this, and this is all I know how to do. Like, what can I do for you? And so there was this opportunity to church plant, and apparently I got into it maybe around the time that church planting became this, like, shiny thing to do.
It's like this is the next thing. Let's rock it.
Everybody wants to church plant now, but it's the truth, man. It's not glorious by any means. Like I'm just thinking about how Jesus walked with the deplorables, right? Like, just the people who nobody wanted to touch, right? People who were cast beyond the city gates. He's out there healing them, and he's with the lepers, he's with the sinners, he's doing this, and it wasn't glorious, right? He got tax collectors and he got fishermen. He's like, hey, come follow me, come be my disciples, and he spent that time with them. And you're talking about, like, I'm with these guys, I'm walking with them when they're doing this, when they're doing that, when they're stabbed. It's just like, man, I'll tell you what, in busy American culture, it's very difficult to slow down enough to even do that with the people who are your friends, who are your friends and your family, much less
somebody that you don't even know,
that you don't know, who needs that kind of. I mean, it's so hard,
So I'll tell you, like, for me, I went to my pastor and you know, in Todd's defense, I don't think he knew what to do with me, right? Because I said, hey,
it's hard,
man. God's calling me to do this, right? He's calling me to, and I mean, it was so foreign to him just because of who I was, where I came. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, it was, and that's not his fault. That's just the way it is. And
right.
so I, you know, part of the overlooked was like, hey, man, this is what Jesus did at the very core. This is, you know, and it's revival. So for me, you know, if you want to start revival, it's the basic, you know, indigenous approach to anything. You will only do so much coming in from the outside to do, you know what I mean, to do it.
Right.
It's a whole nother thing to empower them to do that. Right. Because
have you ever read Gospel for Asia?
No, I haven't.
It's what's the guy's name? Somebody out there is going to know it. Yohanan, what's his last name or his name? Gospel for Asia. It's great to have a computer right in front of your face because then you can just Google
Just
stuff.
look it up.
Yep, time for fact checking. What's the guy's name? Yohanan, I can't remember his name. I'm just going to look it up. KP Yohanan. Yeah, KP Yohanan.
I'll have to write that down.
Yep, Gospel for Asia. So if you go to their website, they will actually send you a free book.
Seriously?
Yeah, and it's KP Yohanan's his story of coming to America, but how he grew up as a kid and he was like preaching in the villages in India, and he was doing open air street preaching, and just how the Lord eventually allowed him to come to the United States. And when he talks about his move from India to the United States, from going from such dire poverty to coming to America, the land of plenty, he describes what he went through. And when I read that, I just cried, because I mean, you don't
think about it.
You don't know how good we had it. I remember just crying and crying. And I'll give it away. He ends up pitching, essentially, you being the one to support his ministry. I mean,
right.
that's eventually what it gets to. But he's saying, look, the indigenous have the best possibility to reach those that are like them, right? Like the white missionary coming, and he comes up with this thing called the rice gospel, essentially, where you come in, you feed a population a bunch of rice. When the rice goes away, the gospel goes with it.
Right.
So you come in.
It's true.
Yeah, you come in and you bring them this service, and when the service is gone, they go back. They're like, well, the food's gone. Let's go bow our knee to that, to that statue again or whatever. But essentially what he says is, look, if you support our ministry, so rather than spending $3,500 to take a trip to India or wherever, send that money to our organization. And with that money, we're going to train 10 indigenous pastors rather than just have one guy here for 1 week who is maybe going to make some impact, but isn't going to make as big of an impact that we could if we, right? And so, it's just the same thing. It's just like people like you. And that's what I was thinking about just with your story. Well, it almost seems obvious that you would end up ministering in prison, because that's where you came from. And you know what I mean? Like, you've gone through that.
That's the hilarious part, right? And so this is what I found. Most people that have been to prison, I just had a conversation with my buddy, Randy Pennington. He actually goes to Mending Place, and he got out not too long ago, but it was when you get out, right? You're like, I don't ever want to come back to this place. This sucks. You know what I mean? The food's horrible. Everything's bad. I don't want to come back. And then God starts saying, hey, hold on. You know what I mean? Hold on. And what you find is you find yourself uncomfortable, not in a bad way, but it's the Holy Spirit, you know what I mean, working inside of you, trying to say, okay, now here's the deal. You know what I mean? You didn't go to prison just because you did some dumb things. I put you here to train you and to grow you, right? And it's the sovereignty, it's the ordering, the steps, it's the and so, like, Randy, he was like, man, and we talked. He's like, yeah, I ain't going back to prison. I'll teach Toomey on the outside, because he's a Toomey graduate and all that. And he said, and so today he looked at me and he's like, look, man, I got another 6 months. I'm gonna get my badge. I'm going back. You know what I mean? And he's one of the guys that we planted the church in Hutch with. And so he's Toomey trained. He's well equipped. He's helped plant. You know what I mean? And that's the deal. Is God says, hey, man, I've called you to this, and it doesn't happen with a lot of us. A lot of us, can settle in, but for me, it was like I'm watching these dudes just kill themselves and die, or just come out and end up, you know what I mean? And it's like, man, something's got to be done.
Right.
We just got to do something.
Weren't you just on the news recently talking about this? Wasn't there a story done on you or something like that? Tell me about that.
So it's crazy, right? Topeka Capital Journal did an article on. So we did this thing. I got to meet the governor that day. It was pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
But I did a thing about how as a community we can all work together to do these things, and it's me doing what I do well, but you doing what you do well. It's just we're doing it together, you know what I mean, to help whoever that is, Joe, Nancy, I mean whoever. And so so they did the whole article on the housing piece and this and what it looks like, and how there was another organization that tried to come in and basically they shut them down, and then but they had pretty open arms with us, and it was kind of neat because I got to talk to the sheriff, the chief of police, or let me see, Vallejo. I mean, just a whole bunch of organizations, right? About how that collective impact is far better than me just trying to do everything, because it's impossible for me to do what I'm trying to do by myself. And so it was, God's really he's just opened a lot of doors where I have had a neat opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, man. Like I just hearing your story and then seeing the trajectory of your life and the path that God has taken you down. And man, it's like when he wants something done, he's going to do it, and he's going to open the doors, and he's going to connect you with the organizations, and he's going to make the right connection. He's going to open the right doors for you and close the wrong doors for others, and have you doing exactly what you need to be doing.
That's the deal.
So tell me a little bit about, you messaged me a couple days ago. You're like, hey, I want to do this thing. Tell me about what you want to do to help people reintegrate, right? Like it's a kind of not like a job fair, but
no, it's like a resource hub. It's like a
resource hub. That's the one.
So we call it the reentry hub, and what we
reentry hub.
And that's what I wanted to talk to. And that's why I reached out and said, hey, because here's the thing: we don't lose men and women at the job. We don't lose them in the car. You know what I mean? We lose them going from one place to the other to try to get resources and navigate what it takes. And so here's an example. Let's say somebody has to register in Kansas because if you get drug charges, if you're violent, or if you're a sexual offender, you have to register with the sheriff's office, right? So let's say that somebody's got a drug problem and they got to register. So now, instead of just getting out and going to the parole office, doing the indoctrination, the this, and then moving on, they have to go to the sheriff's office and register. Then they got to go to the parole office and check in with their PO. And let's say maybe it's late on a Friday, right? So the PO's gone at noon or something, and so now they got to wait till Monday or Tuesday, and so now they've got this whole weekend of unaccountability, and so then they go see their PO. Well, their PO also says, hey, you got to take these classes, and so now you see what I'm saying? And
so talk about that, because I'm typing this out. Maybe talk about how it's a highly unrealistic expectation.
It is.
And so where's that coming from? Corrections, government?
No, so here's the deal, right? And I'll tell you this, the Department of Corrections for Kansas has done a phenomenal job of trying to help, you know what I mean, change really how we do corrections. And so there's a lady named Gloria Geither, and she helped develop the Mentoring for Success program, and she's a rock star. She's worked for like 30 years, and she is all about proper case management and change and growth. So what's happened though is, all the way back in the 70s, you start the war on crime and the war on poverty and the war on drugs and all, you know what I mean, all this.
Right, yeah.
And so we have crammed people into facilities. And so, as time goes on, if you don't fix the problem, it just gets worse. You can't cover a symptom. And so that's what's happened. And so now everything's gotten so stringent that you have to do this over here and do this. So, and then, so while that's getting worse, money and funding is leaking out the back. And so it's made it to where you can't really do it easily.
Right. So with all this list of things that you have to do to register and check in here and go there and do all that, that requires transportation. Not a lot of these guys have. It's not like, hey, I'm fresh out of prison and I got a sick whip. You know what I'm saying?
No, I've got $10,000 in fines. You know what I mean? I've got no car. I've got no bus pass. Or hey, I'm in a new city. I don't even know where the bus goes. I don't even know.
They come out in the negative, right? They're trying to dig themselves out of another hole, right?
So my old pastor, he was my mentor in prison. His name's Doug Ball. He goes, He goes, you're coming out of prison with 2 strikes on your head. He says,
Right.
I'm just being honest with you,
Yeah.
right? And that's not what you've done. That's just how it is, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always lived like in the video games, how there's, some strikes. And so I always think of, I've got 2 strikes. And so that means I only got 1 chance, you know what I mean, to really do or accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish.
So you're trying to get a bunch of these organizations in one room
Yep.
during one time during a month
Yep.
and run these guys through this so they can knock it all out in one shot.
To where they can come in, we can sit down, we can spend an hour with them coaching, what are you doing, where's your plan, help build the plan with them, and then start plugging them in so you guys offer bus passes, well, so and then his helping hands, maybe we could talk with Paul, you know what I mean, and all these organizations, and rather than trying to send them on a wild maze through the city, man, they just come to one
Just
spot.
bring them one spot, resource hub.
And then
I love it.
And then track them, right? And so build a case, build a folder, and then walk with them as they go. And so here's the beauty, right? There's a woman named Desiree Moniz, and she runs Avenue of Life in Kansas City, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and it's where my wife works. But what she does is she is the backbone agency for families in Wyandotte County. I mean, you know what I mean? The poorest county in the whole state. And she has helped drop homelessness among the youth by 40% by just providing what they call Impact Wednesday. And so all these organizations get together and she walks them through what they need, how you know what I mean, ESL, because in down in Wyandotte you got a bunch of families that don't speak real well English, or they're not citizens, or you have families that are Haitian that just need help. They just need loved on, and because the worst part is these kids don't have anything, and so she's made it to where these families can come in, the parents can get a GED, they can help find a job, they can get housing voucher, and I mean,
this is all nonprofit organizations, right?
Yep, and state agencies. They got DCF.
Oh, they
that
got
comes
state agencies that do it.
It's powerful, and that's what I'm saying is it inspired me because we have the same problem with recidivism. You know what I mean? And if you look, the majority of the homeless problem, a lot of them are felons. A lot of them have charges. And even though mental health is a big issue, there's a criminal piece to it that is the constant thread. So why not replicate that to help them be successful when they get out?
And so there's nothing like that happening in Wichita right now.
I don't
Not
think
that
so.
you know of.
Nope.
Interesting. And so you have the opportunity to go ahead and make that happen.
Yeah, well, that's and that, like I told you, right? It's that one shot deal, and
Right.
so I watched what she did, and I've talked to her. Me and Desiree are good friends, and I said, look, man, this is important. I think that this is the path to help reentry be really successful reentry, right?
Yeah.
Because reentry is not just, everybody likes to say, here's a house to live, here's a job, and here's a car, right? Or here's, people don't wreck on those things. They wreck on the emotional stuff or the relationship or the, and so if you can cut the majority of that out just for the first 6 months to a year and help, with the tracking and then you're going to cut out half the problem.
You made me think of something. I heard somebody say one time, when we label people on the streets as homeless, we've assumed the solution to their problem.
Right. Oh, they just need a home.
Oh, just
They'll
need a
be
home.
fine.
Oh, no, let's talk about addiction.
Yep.
Let's talk about abandonment,
Yep.
abuse. I mean, mental health, all that stuff plays a role. And so you can't just put them in a tiny home and think they're going to be okay.
No, because most of them don't know how to live. Most of them don't, you know what I mean? The social constructs that we've learned to live in, there's not a concept there for that.
Right.
And so it's like, here, let me throw these resources at you, right? Because we want to help. And a lot of it's honest help, but it's, there needs to be somebody that says, this is how you live. This is how you walk this out, man. I'm here for you. You know what I mean? This is the phone number you call when you're losing it at 10 o'clock at night. Let's work this out.
Yeah, man, that's so challenging, bro. Like, for real,
It's a mess.
it's so challenging. Well, I just mean like challenging personally and just even spiritually as the body of Christ. Like, seriously, how much have we committed ourselves to walking with people through those kinds of processes? I just be honest, like, I've got some close friends who've been going through some really life-changing, traumatic, negative experiences.
Right.
And man, it's so hard to even know what to do for people sometimes.
No, because
you know what I'm
the
saying?
answers just aren't there. You know what I mean? You don't get to
Yeah.
just be like, hey, man, I think you just you just got to sometimes just sit and shut up and be like, I don't even know what to tell you. I just
there's-
love you.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I
I
mean?
mean, there's value to relation. There's value to presence.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And man, it's like, if you've ever, I don't know how charismatic or Holy Spirit, guy you are, but if you've ever just sat in the presence of the Lord, like you don't have to say nothing.
No.
You don't have to hear nothing. You're just there, and it's just like, oh man, this is right where I need to be.
Yep. And you can feel it in your chest and your eyes well up. You know what I mean? But that's and that's abiding in the Spirit of God.
Right. But and it's just being in the presence, and sometimes just being with people goes a long way, but also really challenging. What does Jesus say? What good does it do if you tell a man go and be well, and then you don't give him anything to eat, or you don't put any clothes on his body? So there's I think Jesus is saying, look, you can have good intentions, but there has to be maybe some sort of practical application behind that. And so that's where I'm challenged. Just like, we have a church service that people can walk into. So, send the prison guys, like they can come to our service, but what's the next practical thing that's going to be
and
there
what
for
are you
them?
outfitting them to do, right? Where's the, and I get it, but where's the help? Where's the success? You know what I mean? And look, they need a little extra than most people, but there's a lot of people that need extra than most people. The difference is their mask has been ripped off, and unfortunately, out in the real world, you don't get the chance. You know what I mean? You keep the mask on, and so I'll tell you, that's the biggest difference, right? Is watching men worship Christ inside of the prison is untouchable. I've never experienced that. It's
like
on
all
the
they
street.
have,
because that's it, right? So they are number 106,352, or you know what I mean?
Wow.
And let's say he is has a sex case, or let's say nobody talks to him. He's got no family, right? He's had everything stripped except one thing, and that's the Spirit of God, and that's Jesus Christ. And so when you get a whole collective of that in one room, it's because it's
I can't
pure.
imagine.
You know what I mean? It's pure worship. It's not me with my sin. I'm hiding, and it's
well,
amazing.
I mean, are they thinking about dropping the kids off later, or the baseball practice they got to get to, or they got to go buy groceries, or clean the living room, or mow the lawn? Then
nope, it's all thank you.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's just pure and it's beautiful.
I was going to say, that's the beauty of the body of Christ is that, you've mentioned multiple organizations. And I think of even World Impact, and I think of Toomey, and I think of Second Chance Ministries, and just all these, DCF, and just all of these different ministries here in the city who are available to work together, because we're saying, well, what are we doing? What's that next step? Well, it doesn't mean that you have to create every ministry that's needed for prison reintegration within your church body, but there's something to be said about partnership.
That's the deal,
right?
Because you can come do what you do well, and then I could do what I do well, because and I've always heard it like this: if you have a team of people and you may be able to do something at 50%, but John over here can do it at 90, you know what I mean? Why are you going to do that and what you can do when John can do his at 90, and you can kill what you're good at, and then you actually are effective.
Working according to your strengths and your gifting. I mean, same thing with the body of Christ. Like you work in your gifting, you work in yours. Let's not try and make people do something they're not able to do. And that's why I appreciate your story, and you're called to that ministry. I mean, the Lord He's made you for this. He's brought you to it. But not everybody's called to prison ministry.
Nope, not at all.
Right. But I think we are called as the body to support and pray for. And so, I mean, even just sitting here and talking to you, like we've crossed paths in the past, and I kind of knew some of the stuff that you were doing. But it's really encouraging to hear everything that you're doing, because now I know, like, hey, if someone ever asked me about this, that, I can be, you got to hit up Matt Thomas, man.
Right.
He's the guy you got to go to. And that's the power of relationship and conversation, and just making people aware of the things that God has done in your life and what He has you doing right now. So good stuff, man.
Man, I appreciate this.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I was necessarily ready to shut it down, but if
it's cool. I'm just saying. I really do. I appreciate this, man.
For sure.
It's not just my story, right? But it's my buddy Will Stevens' story. It's my buddy William Humphrey, Tyler Lee. You know what I mean? These are all guys that are out and just killing it right now. I mean, absolutely killing it. Mm-hmm. Some of them are active in our ministry. Some of them are restored with their wives and their. You know what I mean? And that's the story. That's
sure.
the bare bones of Jesus Christ.
Right. Right. So I want to do something. You gave me 4 books.
Yeah.
I actually think I have your Kindle version.
Yeah.
I think I've got that on my phone. So I'm going to give these away. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give 2 from Facebook, and then I'm going to give 2 to people who listen to the podcast. So here's how we're going to do this. One of the first times I'm giving stuff away, but if you are watching on Facebook right now and you want one of these books, I'm going to give 2 away. So for the first 2 people to hit me up to direct message me either to my Facebook, Jason Villanueva, or to the Salty Dogs podcast, just message me the Overlooked, and the first 2 people who get into that message are going to get the book, and we'll mail that to you wherever you're at. And then the other 2 that I'm going to give away are going to be for those who are listening to this podcast right now. And so if you're listening and you want the Overlooked book by Matt Thomas, we'll mail it to you. Shoot me an email at saltydogs.podcast@gmail.com and just put in the subject, The Overlooked, and then we'll go back and forth and we'll make sure that you get this book. And so I appreciate you bringing these in, man.
No,
powerful,
that's cool.
Powerful stuff. So tell me, what's the journey here? You kind of you've told your story.
Yep.
Where does this end up? What's your CTA, your call to action?
So I'm going to tell you, and this is how the book was split. Is it's 3 parts. The first part, and so there's a lot of people that write a lot of books about themselves. You know what I mean? And I didn't want to be that guy, because I don't want it to ever be Matt Thomas. I want it to be Firm Foundations or Brothers in Blue, or you know what I mean, or CTV. I don't. And that's part of. And so I wrote the book, and so my story is really just the first part.
Okay.
And then what it gets into the second part is the fact that of what's really in the prison and who's really in the prison and the potential and the growth and the leaders and just the families and the fact that and you've seen it on Facebook or any of the news channels or anything, how when somebody gets in trouble, right, all of a sudden it's convicted felon such and such did such and such, that and we don't even know if it was all the way, but it's the portrayal for the ratings, right? And so so what happens is the media shifts, and so it's thought like everybody that's in prison is waiting, to chase your kids down with a van and or rob your house, and that's just not the truth. The truth is the majority of the prison is filled with men and women who did some really dumb things,
right?
But also men and women who were raised to do those things. I mean, if you are told from a young age that don't ever trust the police, don't trust the government, you know what I mean, you got to get yours, get that money, you know what I mean, you got to provide for it, and you are indoctrinated into that lifestyle, you're going to live that lifestyle. And so you really got to look. And so I talk about the fact that there's men and women. I've told a lot of people stories, and I changed their name. Right, it's the first time I've ever done something goofy. Right, like I've changed the name to protect. But
yeah, happens all the time.
But I did because they're real honest stories.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that these aren't just reprobate convicts that are. Man, that is life, and that is life abundantly. God has spoken into these men to be successful, and man, we need to give them a shot. We need. And so I was trying to get rid of the stigma attached that, because everybody I talk to that tours through the prison that comes in with me or CJ or some of the people that I work with, they're like, that's not as bad as I thought. You know what I mean? And that's, and they do it real whispery, right? Because they're like, they were expecting like a riot going off on the left. You know, and it's just not like that. Yeah, right. There's dangerous things and there's bad things that happen, but the fact is they're somebody's kids and they're somebody's parents. You know what I mean? And when it comes down to it, it's decisions that they got caught for, that I got caught for, that I know a lot of people that have driven drunk and ran over stuff, that have stolen, you know what I mean?
And haven't gotten caught. Right.
Or they had enough money to get a good lawyer and to not spend any time in prison. And I mean, and it's not being, it's just, it's factual.
There's definitely a couple things in my past that had I gotten caught, I'd be in prison. Hands down.
So I left the base so drunk one day. It was my birthday, right? I drove off base and drove home, and I drank like a half gallon of Jim Beam, right? And just trashed. And so I should have gone to jail. I should have gone.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that was a long. I mean, there's things that that we all do. You know, there's guys that have sex cases that slept when they were 18, slept with a girl that was 17 or 16 or you know, and even when the girl was in the wrong place and he was in the wrong place and where they were, I mean, they were both. I'm not justifying it, but
Sure.
But these are guys that have to spend the rest of their life registering as a sex offender and wear an ankle monitor for something they did when they were 17, 18 years old. That's so to me, you know what I mean? It's understanding what's really inside of the prison is the only way that you'll be able to, and the fact that if you don't change, right? And so here's just facts. If you don't change these men and women, they're going to come out worse than they went in. And because it's a predatory environment, right? Because you got a bunch of kids in there that are scared and acting, and so what do? Hurt people.
Right.
And so that just, it keeps, and so what I wanted to try to tell people is, hey, if you really want to see a lower recidivism rate, you want to see cheaper taxes, you want to see better neighborhoods, you want to see families restored, you want to see kids out of the foster system, you want to see the criminal justice system reformed, then you have to actively pour in to these men and women, or it doesn't happen. The state can't afford to do that. You know what I mean? They're running on fumes right now, and they're trying their best, but that's not their job. That's our job. I mean, we're the hands and feet of Jesus. You know, we need to be doing that. That's, to me, that's just a big deal. And so even though prison ministry is my heart, it doesn't mean I don't stop and help feed somebody. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean I don't. And so it's like what you said, not everybody's called to prison ministry, but there's a lot of overcrossing areas that you know, whether you're a business owner or a church leader or there's all these things that we could honestly work together on that would forever. And so that's what I spent the whole middle part of the book is saying, hey, this is who and what and how and this is why we should, you know, and this is who are the people that are in there. And then I told a bunch of stories, and there's some pretty sad spots in there, right? Because even my story, man, it's funny, you can tell your story. It's a whole nother thing, right? When you have to type
it out, yeah.
So you know, I've it's come into Lansing, and so a lot of these guys are guys that I've walked with in Lansing, up in the Max Penitentiary, and they've read their own story in my book. You know what I mean? Wow. But of course with a different name.
Sure.
But they know.
They know, yeah.
And the beauty is though is it's like it's that ancient thing of, you know, telling somebody's story, the tradition, like the old Jewish, you know what I mean? The old Hebrews talking about, you know, my ancestors, and so it's a beautiful thing, and it blesses them. But what happens is they feel helpless, they feel lost, and so my whole goal was to say, hey, man, you could really empower these people's life just with a little bit of time. And then the last part of the book is the practical way to plant a church inside of the prison.
Okay, good. So you give the practical, here's how you do it.
Down to details of, this is how you talk to the chaplain, this is how you talk to the administration, this is how you respect other people with the call outs, this is how you do, and what I used was the PLANT acronym that World Impact uses for their church planning model.
Okay.
And I just shifted everything to what we did when we planted the 2 churches in Hutch, and then the few that we did up in Lansing.
Yep. So you've planted multiple churches in prisons.
Yes.
Yeah.
With a great team, though. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Yeah.
I want to say something just because I thought about this. You know, I preached a message one time at Church on the Street.
Yep.
So, you know, those guys, they do homeless ministry here in Wichita. Pocky, awesome guy. He actually lives in our backyard. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Wait.
So I know a guy that used to work for Pocky. I just ran into him in Norton that's coming out soon that used to cook in a restaurant with him.
Okay.
And talked about what a great guy Pocky was.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Yeah, Pocky's a cool dude. He was on in season 1. I think we had him on twice. But yeah, so anyways, Pocky, great guy. I was out at Church on the Street, and I preached this message, and it just, I mean, it obviously applies to those that are in prison, but the overlooked. And so, you know, Jesus, the disciples that he chose were the overlooked Jews.
Yep.
I mean, they were. So all of the other rabbis, all the Pharisees, all those guys, they would have already chosen their disciples, and they would have chosen them at an earlier age, right around the age where, you know, they come into manhood, so they would have their bar mitzvah or whatever it is, you know, by the age of 12 or 13. And, you know, they've already, memorized a bunch of the Torah, and they've already gone. And so they get to a certain point to where they're either, oh, you just go ahead and go into society, or hey, come and be my disciple.
Pull you in, and
right, and we're gonna come into this religious organization. And so Jesus, when he went and chose his disciples, he wasn't choosing like the Pharisees would choose. He chose the rejects.
Right.
He chose the overlooked. They'd already, as it's kind of like playing a game of kickball, right? And it's just like you're the last kid standing, and it's just like, well, I guess I'll take you.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Jesus, on the other hand, is like, you with
right.
the glasses and the broken arm, you know what I mean? And the crutch. I'm going to take you
exactly.
first. Yeah.
So he had already, he went and chose, like, here comes this rabbi walking by the Sea of Galilee, and he calls these guys who are fishermen to come follow him. And they see that he's a rabbi, and they're just like, wait a second, what?
Yep.
Like, I thought I'd already been overlooked.
Yep.
Like, I thought I missed my turn.
Yep.
And then he gets these crazy guy like Peter chopping people's ears off and, totally missing.
I love that dude.
Totally missing it, right? But then using him, right?
Yep.
And just in an amazing way. And, all throughout the scriptures and in Acts, we see, good things happening. And then, of course, Paul has to, like, rebuke Peter because he's,
Because he's Peter.
Yeah, because he's Peter, right? Yeah. So, but still, and he's still got 2 books in the Bible. Like, come on, right?
Yep.
So it's just really interesting, the correlation there. It's just like, the people who we think that aren't the ones that are, are going to make an impact or build the kingdom or be able to do X, Y, and Z or whatever it is, right? It's like, when I got into ministry and then I became a pastor, and that's in air quotes, pastor. And, you start to look for leadership potential within your congregation. And honestly, you'd sit down and you'd have meetings and you'd say, okay, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? And there was always a reason to not look at so-and-so. And I remember one day saying, you know what? If we held these people to the standard of ministry, or to the standard that God held me to when I entered into ministry, nobody would be in ministry.
Yep.
Right? Like Paul says, don't forget who you were and where you were when you were called.
Yep.
And so it's just like, I'm looking at people and I'm just like, I don't know. Well, if you really knew what was going on in my life when I said yes to the call, like, nobody's qualified.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
You
like,
weren't sitting there ready to go with your diploma ready.
Yeah,
you know what I
it's
mean?
just like, gee, I wish I'd get the phone call for ministry. It's just like, I'm sitting there thinking like, oh God, what have I done with my life? And like, can you still use me? Did I miss my call? Can I still make an impact? Who's going to hire me? Who's going to give me the opportunity to preach and lead and to, if I was, I got a really great opportunity, and I knew it's because the Lord was just like,
So I'll tell you
into
this.
the kingdom.
So when I would listen to like Matthew Penner and Darren and some of you guys talk about church planting, right? And it was like, man, there's no way in heck I am going to be a church planter. That was so foreign to me, right? That even being a pastor, even it was just foreign, right? Like I'd go in and preach to the guys, but that wasn't pastoring. I wasn't. And what ended up happening was, and it was funny, right? Randy called his wife to call my wife to call me, right? One day I'm working, and she's like, hey, Randy inside was wondering if you want to be a pastor, right? And I'm like, no. You know what I mean? I was like, no. And I'm not a pastor. And so what ended up happening was I sought counsel from a group of people. I talked, I prayed. I talked to my wife, right? Because my wife's my good barometer for what
yeah, for sure.
And then I still said no, because it was like, I was scared. I could never see myself as a pastor
that way. Yeah.
And so here's what happened. I talked with Ryan Carter one day, and it was funny. He was doing the First Evangel School, and we were just, I have these hallway conversations in World Impact that are like monumental in life, right?
Yeah,
it's never the main thing. It's
right.
just in the hallway.
Uh-huh.
And he goes, Matt, I get up, I speak. He goes, sometimes I don't even remember what I say. He says, but then somebody inevitably says, that was the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Right. And he said, I don't know what the heck I'm doing half the time. He said, but I know I'm supposed to be here.
Right.
And he says, look, usually I wouldn't say this. He says, but you need to do this. You need to do this. Right. And so, and Ryan, I mean, if you ever spend any time with Ryan, he's real easygoing, and he talks, and he's really good at teaching, but and it just changed my life. And so I took that one step, right? He was like, just take that first step. Just take the first step.
Yeah.
And so I took it. And then we planted 2 churches simultaneously in 2 different prison yards on on the same compound in Hutch. And then a year later, I get the call to Brothers in Blue and slide in right at the time they're talking about planting these other churches, right? So then I help plant 3 more and then 1 more after that on the outside, which we're going to replant here. But it was just crazy. And it was, and it was all because because of that nudge.
Right.
And somebody saying, just like Jesus did, hey,
yeah,
I see you. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I know you're going to do this. So let's go.
Yeah, for sure. And you just think about the contrast, right? Like if you're the, if you're the guy on the boat with a net and you're just doing your thing and you're just living life, and then you look over and I don't know, maybe the high priest is passing by and, with
you're like,
yeah, you're just like, oh, and then you just look and you're just like, yeah. I mean, as if that were something to be desired, but it
resonates though.
Right.
You're
people,
like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And people, I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I used to sit in the pews, man, and I would see the guys on stage and I would aspire to be impactful. And like, I used to think, man, if I could just be there, like, look at these guys preaching to all these people and doing this thing. Yeah, that's all I need. And then, you get an opportunity and you're just kind of like, man, I'm still a person.
Yep.
But I think a lot of times we glamorize the pulpit or we glamorize positions of leadership and different titles and that kind of thing. But man, the truth is, like, all these people are just people.
Yep.
And just people like you and me, and they said yes to the Lord, and they're doing the best they know how, and they're trying to follow. And for some, they get a big following, and some don't. But everybody's making an impact the way that they need to be making an impact. You know what I'm saying? Like it's if you're preaching in the prisons, like I don't know if you're recording that stuff. Like I think it's rare that the majority of Christian America is ever going to hear that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But it's impactful to them.
Yeah.
And so, man, it's been awesome stuff. Let's take a real quick moment and take a look at some comments here from Facebook. And so, Christy says, we were talking about this at work today. Our prison system is set up for failure, not change. We talked a little bit about that. Barbara says, childhood trauma, common trait in addiction and incarceration.
It's true.
That's definitely true. You never know what people have gone through, man. And honestly, like going through some rehab stuff myself and going through some counseling, like one of the main things they do is they take you back to some of that childhood traumatic stuff. Like I had to fill out this workbook and they were saying, think about people who've hurt you. And I mean, there's like some guy in college that I could think of that I like still harbor anger toward. You know what I'm saying? Like,
hey, as soon as you think about it, it pulls it up. And
it pulls it up. You're like, I probably ought to deal with that. Christy says, God's good. Amazing testimony, sir. I pray God keeps blessing and using you to reach out and share your testimony to hope to so many hurt and lost men.
Amen.
Who need to know they can start over. Amen. And then Corey Howard says, it's absolutely crazy how far the Lord can really take people. Awesome testimony, Matt. Well, we all go through something, but it makes us who the Lord wants us to be if we allow it, like you
Amen.
did. Yeah. And Chris, one of our hosts, he's not here, but he says, what's up, fellas? And so what's up, Chris?
What up, Chris?
We miss you being here, man. But yeah, it's been a good time. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts or anything you want to say to people?
Well, I would say this. The funny thing about incarceration is everybody knows somebody who's incarcerated.
Definitely,
you know what I mean?
And
so I heard the statistics the other day, and it was like 1 out of every 110 person in the United States is somewhere in the justice system, right? And so I mean, that's
1 out of how many?
1 out of like 110.
Okay.
And I I mean that's kind of set you back on your heels, right? Because we're talking about people call small churches, about 100, 110 people, and so really out of one of those, there's always somebody that's somewhere in the system. And so, so what I would say is, we can work together to change this. We can't depend on people that don't really understand or care to change the system.
Right.
But we can. Mm-hmm. And there's and coupled with some of those people and coupled with some other resources, and that as Christians, let's take some time to work together to help these men and women be successful, not only in prison, but when they get out, so that kids do have a home and families do get restored, and we can cut some of this out.
Yeah, for sure, man. I definitely want people to know where to find you online, like you guys on Facebook, or do you have a website?
Yep. So Facebook, Matt Thomas,
okay.
Facebook page, Firm Foundations Ministries. You can also, Brothers in Blue Reentry, and I'm working in the Lansing prison when I'm inside the prison, And so I'm pretty easy to get a hold of, or you could just track my wife, Christina Thomas, down. By the way, hi, honey. I saw the hi.
Hi, honey. So you guys, Firm Foundations, do you have a website?
Yep.
What is it?
It's firmfoundationsministries.org. And it's being fixed right now, like literally right now.
So it's not live?
It should be live. The old one's live. They're updating the whole deal.
Yeah, and is this somewhere where people can give money? Do you guys need money?
Yeah, so there's a PayPal. We definitely need money. Absolutely need money.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, so I'm not afraid to ask for money for you. So, man, if you guys were moved or any part of you just kind of leapt, this guy's in it. Matt's in the prisons. He's working with guys who need discipleship and mentorship. He's working with guys as they're getting out.
Yep.
And I know, it takes money to do these things. And so you can go to firmfoundationsministries.org.
Yep.
And right now on this current site, just scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a big red button that says donate. And so if you guys want to kick some funds his way, that'd be amazing. Obviously, give with a cheerful heart. And reach out, man. If you guys want to connect with Matt somehow, you can email us or do whatever you need to do, and we can make the connections. It's all about partnership and networking and knowing people. So good stuff. All right.
Thank you, brother.
Man, I'd super appreciate it. Definitely remember if you guys got this far into the podcast and hopefully these books are gone by the time you listen, because that'll mean other people have already listened and got them, but you can get these books. So I've got 2 The Overlooked books by Matt Thomas to go to those watching on Facebook Live. Send us a DM into our Facebook page and just say The Overlooked, and then we'll go back and forth on how to get this out to you. And then again, if you're listening to the podcast, send us an email, saltydogs.podcast@gmail.com, and then put in the email The Overlooked, and we'll make sure you get this book. So again, thanks for donating this to us, and man, I appreciate it. All you Salty Dogs listeners, we always appreciate what you do for us. If you haven't left a rating or review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, please go and do that. It helps us get the information about the podcast out more. Follow us on Facebook. We also have a Facebook group, and so search Salty Dogs Podcast Group in your Facebook search bar and join the conversation. We're always asking questions, going back and forth conversation. We've gotten to where we're posting some pretty funny memes these days, and so some good Christian memeage going on. Check us out on saltydogspodcast.com, and as always, Patreon.